Jana, the little sister.
And I'm Jeff, her big brother. Welcome to Sibling Rivalry, a podcast about our favorite sport, baseball.
This week on Sibling Rivalry Baseball, we talk about the general state of baseball.
Now let's take a quick check of the SRBB headlines.
The ranks of minor leaguers are heavily trimmed across baseball.
David Price, Dodgers pitcher, will give each Dodger minor league player $1,000 for the month of June.
Both Angels teams in the Dream Bracket 2 have been eliminated. The 79 Angels lost to the 61 New York Yankees in the first round, and the 2002 Angels lost to the 2011 Texas Rangers.
You can check out these and past headlines on our website, siblingrivalrybb.com. And don't forget to subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to our podcast. Last week we talked about different things happening within baseball as we watch MLB, MLBPA go back and forth trying to find solutions, deals, potentially for there to be a 2020 season. And right now, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. There are a lot of players who are saying it doesn't look good. There are even some owners or anonymous sources connected to owners who are saying some of the things that are being offered in these proposals are non-starters. So we're trying to figure out exactly what the state of baseball is now, from the minor leagues and all the issues that are going on there to the 2020 season, if there will be one, and what will it look like as far as the nuts and bolts of an agreement. It's kind of confusing. And right now, as is the state of our nation, it seems like baseball is mirroring that. It doesn't feel like the hope we had early on is still with us now.
So the proposals that have come out, it seems as though the owners are perfectly happy with not having a season at all. So one of the latest proposals from the players union to the owners, but we don't know how the owners are going to react to it. And at this point, just the way things are going, it seems like it doesn't matter. It's kind of a moot point. It's going to go back and forth until they're going to run out of time to even have a season. So they should either just call it now and say, you know what, we just can't come to an agreement, or just play. But I don't know how that happens. The other problem too is, as I say, the other problem, well, I guess it is a problem for Major League Baseball, is the NBA and the NHL are both coming, at this point, should be coming back. I mean, they're in talks to do it, and the commissioners of both of those leagues we're excited. We want to get back. We want to get the players back on the court, back on the ice, and they're looking at showmanship rather than Major League Baseball, where everybody sees is just money and greed.
Right, and the owners and the players aren't doing anything to make it look different, to change that narrative. And the NBA, I did see say July 31st is when they hope to be back. So they've set a date. Now, in the players' latest proposal, they kind of set a date as well to start at the beginning of July, and they want a 3-week spring training. So it means that they're going to have to do something soon.
Right, and it's a 114-game season is what they're proposing, and that it would end October 31st. At this point, they have to get on the ball. Pun intended on that.
I think on the players' side, because there's no deadline ever been set that we're aware of, that the players have kind of made an artificial deadline. If we don't start by this point, it doesn't matter what our proposal is because we'll run out of time.
Looking forward to, and we talked about this before, is when you're looking forward to the 2021 season, how prepared will players be? How long will they have off before they go back to spring training? And the more we wait, that time dwindles.
I think that going back to something you said, which is something we've touched on in the past, the owners have the least amount of motivation to have a season. Financially, sure, they're going to take a hit, but they'll take a bigger hit playing the season than not. Even if the players agreed, we're going to take this sliding scale or some other version where they get just a lower percentage of their overall pay, the owners would still have to pay them, and they still aren't going to get revenue to anywhere near what they would get during a regular season with full stadiums. Even the teams that don't draw heavy every game or close to sellout every game are going to be hampered even more, because they're going to have to cut the total number of people that could come in once they do allow fans to return. So any way they look at it, they're going to still pay the players a fair amount of money. They're not going to be getting any revenue. Then if they do have games, they also have to pay for all the stadium staff that are required to be there. And then when they do get fans back in the stands, then they have to hire those people, the ushers, the concessions, security, extra security that they would normally have to maintain all the things that they're supposed to do based on the agreement. So from the owner's standpoint, why bother? And I wouldn't even be surprised if some of those owners probably don't have some sort of an insurance against this to cover. And it may still not cover as much, but they still end up getting more than they would if they played the season.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that. But yeah, they probably have some kind of backup. But yeah, the owners, they want it's like 75% pay cut now, I mean, this is the highest paid players, and then it goes, that sliding scale.
Right.
But the players have a good point. They're like, we already made an agreement, and they need to stick to that. The owners are just sitting back, and unfortunately, some of the players, I think the biggest one, Blake Snell of the Rays, they just stepped in it and said some stuff that it just doesn't set right with baseball fans.
No, and we know that it's based off of current situations. How many people, 40 million people are unemployed or whatever the number is. I mean, it's a huge number. It does, like we've talked about before, it does sound like the players are a little tone deaf. But if you step back from it and stop thinking that the players are just spoiled, rotten people playing a game, this is their job. And if we put it into the context of how it would apply to anybody, if you go to your work, you're only going to make this amount. You're going to make 1/3 of your total yearly salary this year. You're going to have an issue with it. The problem is they have numbers that are far beyond, as we talked about before as well. The amount of money they make is far beyond what most, but there are a lot of players. I think somebody posted there was like 65% of players don't make Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, Manny Machado numbers, and everybody else up there, Zach Greinke and those guys. They don't make that kind of money. Those people in the sliding scale are going to be protected, but is it fair that somebody like Mike Trout, who gets paid he was going to get paid about $35 million this year, would only get about $7 million?
Yeah, 7-8 million. Mm-hmm.
So put that in your own terms. It's also a bad thing when it comes to, employee rights. I know that this isn't probably going to bleed over into the real world, but it happens in the real world every day.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's ridiculous that everybody wants to blame the players. I know the players say stupid things, but you start messing with their money. They have bills. They have things that they're doing. They have, investments. All of us can look at it. You've done it. I do. Or, we've both done this. We look at how much money we're going to make. We make monthly. We look at the year. We go, okay, you want to buy this. You want to buy you budget for it. You want to buy a new house. You budget for it.
Mm-hmm.
All of these guys aren't out there buying $20 million houses. They may also be taking care of family members. Look at a lot of the foreign players spend a good portion of their money sending it back home so their families can have better lives. They've planned out, this is how much it's going to take for us to live, and this is what we want to do. It's an American dream. We'd all like to be able to do that. Sure, when I look at it and say, well, if I was supposed to make $35 million this year, but I only got $7 million, that's still pretty good.
Yeah,
because
it is.
$7 million's a huge number to me. But if I was in that position and they're trying to take all that away from me, then it's like, wait a minute, that's not what you promised to pay me. And I know this year is different, but that's not even what you promised to pay me in this year's agreement?
The Hall of Famer pitcher, Tom Glavin, he was a union player rep during 94-95 season and during that strike. And he said if it were to come down to an economic issue, and that's the reason baseball didn't come back, you're looking at a situation similar to the strike of 94-95 as far as fans are concerned. Even if the players were 100% justified in what they were complaining about, they're still going to look bad. And of course, in 94-95, there was no pandemic. There was no record unemployment. There was no growing, the civil unrest that's going on right now. It's compounded into, I guess, I want to say the perfect storm, but for Major League Baseball to come back, you've got all these other factors, and people aren't seeing the salaries. They're looking at the salaries that the players are making, and they're huge. Like you said, $7 million to us, that's huge. But they don't see that because everything else is going on. Baseball needs to come back. I think it's a Gallup poll in 2018, 9% of adults chose baseball as their favorite sport to watch. That was behind football at 37% and basketball at 11%. And soccer was number 4 at 7%. So baseball we love it, we'll always love it, but it's becoming, the demographic is smaller and smaller. And when attendance has been declining for the last 10 years, baseball's attracted about 68.5 million fans in 2019, where before it was 80 million a dozen years earlier. The local markets do really well, the regional markets, but the national viewership is dying for baseball. Of course, it doesn't help when you have announcers like Joe Buck on the World Series. I had to throw that in there.
May be true, but the bigger problem is not Joe Buck, obviously.
No, not Joe Buck.
He's just a symptom of things. The problem is that they don't market the game very well. And Rob Manfred blamed Mike Trout for not being out there marketing the game. Mike Trout markets the game in his way. All of these guys market the game. I've seen different times where people said, how about instead of talking about all the stuff that's wrong with the game or that you find is bad with the game, find all the good things, accentuate that. I would think that that's what the league would be doing. Rob Manfred and his team, they tried like the last year, what was one of the one thing, it was a promotion or a promo they did where are the two biggest MVP candidates in Christian Yelich and Cody Bellinger played a game of horse with home runs. That was something that could get people thinking about it.
Yeah, Belly versus Yelly. It was great.
Yeah, and different things like that to bring it up. Show the exciting parts. There's not any of that. When you see baseball promos, they're not like they used to be where they talked about baseball's fantastic, or was that basketball? And you would see some great play. Why aren't they accentuating that? Show a play by Francisco Lindor, Javi Baez, Andrelton Simmons, Cody Bellinger, Mookie Betts, any of these guys, any of these stars that are out there, show those. Push the things that are positive and not, it takes so long for a game. The game isn't any longer than most sports.
True. And I think the biggest problem is right at the top with Rob Manfred, because look at Rob Manfred, who seems to complain about baseball, and he's the commissioner of baseball, so he should be the number one fan. He should be the one pushing it. Contrast him to Adam Silver of the NBA. They love him. He is,
he's a fan.
He is a fan, but you have the big players like him, LeBron James, or he just off the top of my head, but he is the biggest star, and he is. But they like the commissioner. I don't know of any ball players. I mean, the biggest outspoken one is Trevor Bauer, and he's come out and said, he's bad for the sport. He's not helping. And so to me, in order to get baseball back to where it should be, it is the national pastime. It should always be the national pastime. But if you have somebody in there that's a downer, like Rob Manfred, you need to get him out. Something, the owners or, I don't know what the deal is there, but you got to get somebody in there that's a better PR, that loves the game. That's not, it's, we got to get younger viewers, so we need to put all these things in, pitch clocks and stuff like that, because the game's too slow.
Younger viewers come from more access to the game, whether it be earlier start times, weekend games, more day games, things like that. Having different types of promotions that bring the kids to the park, but it also starts at the bottom. It starts with bringing them up. Part of my love of the game wasn't just watching it. I still would have probably loved it watching the game, but it made it such a deeper thing for me by playing it and understanding, watching the players. Recently on Twitter, somebody asked, which players did you emulate their stance? Who did you try to have your batting stance like? We do that playing wiffle ball or baseball out in the field or on the street. Get up and try to be Pete Rose, or take somebody's batting stance. Steve Garvey, the way he always had like a hack when he was doing his warm-up swings.
Yeah.
And just the way that he did it. Those little things. We connected with those things. We wanted to go out. We wanted to make a play diving to our right at shortstop and pick up and throw the guy out at first base, making a catch back at the wall. The excitement of those games, and it not just being something to do, but actually getting involved with it and getting a feeling for it. And it's going to start that low, T-ball, little league. At some point, some kids may play those and then realize they just don't want to play anymore. But the kids that want to play, you got to continue to work with them and build them. And I believe that they're getting ready to tear out part of that system as well in the dismantling of the minor league. This is another issue this season. We know that just because of the way things are working out, minor league teams in general aren't going to be able to meet the criteria for the health part because of where their stadiums are, how they have to travel to get from place to place, those kind of things. But they're contracting, 42 teams? No longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right now, the A's, I think they're still the only team, but the A's have said at the end of June, we're not paying you anymore, the $400 a week that they would have gotten anyway. And that's not great wages anyway, but it's still at $1,600 a month. It's still helping somebody continue to build and fight for that dream.
Yeah, and the A's owner, John Fisher, he's worth $2 billion. He could pay out of his own pocket the minor league players. And when you, as an owner or as an organization, say, okay, we're not going to pay you after this date, what are you saying to those minor leaguers? You're not saying you don't value them. You're not valuing the development. And that's the sad thing. I mean, I was looking through, and the Pirates owner, $1.1 billion. Now, I think the Pirates are on that list to pay their minor leaguers through at least the end of June. But he is using the shutdown as an avenue to suspend team contributions to employees' 401k plans. I mean, that is just low in my book, especially when anybody can go on and see, okay, and obviously he doesn't have it sitting around his house. I'm sure it's not, you can't just go. But the thing is these are your minor league players. These are the guys that are going to that hope to get to the majors, that will be the future stars. And you're saying, sorry, figure it out.
They're also assets. They're all assets. And they could be traded with another team to bring something in that will help your team. And maybe that person goes on and helps some other team. But whatever it is, they're taking that away. They're cutting it down. How many of these players that are no longer getting paid by the A's, and I think I said till the end of June, no, they're done as of the end of May.
Yes.
There are some of the teams are paying through, I think, September 7th, which was the end of the minor league season. Some through August 31st. But how many of these guys, even if they get paid till the end of the season, aren't going to be able to make it back? How many of these guys who are members of the A's are done with baseball now? You could say, and some might, oh, well, that means they weren't fired up. They didn't have the fire to get there. They weren't motivated to make it. And that might be true. And it could be that they can't afford to do it. There's a lot of different things. How many times do you see stories where somebody was in a spot where they probably could have done it, and then a hardship came along and it took them right out of it because they had to go do something else to survive?
Yeah, and you were talking about the foreign players, like especially those Latin American players. They're getting $400 a month, but they're still sending probably half, if not more, of that back home because this is their dream. They want to play, and they're living in 5 guys in one room and eating beans and rice or
cup of noodles.
They're doing what they need to do to sacrifice to play this game. And it's sad when owners and like John Fisher and the organization they don't see that, or they refuse to acknowledge it.
Absolutely. So that'll be the question as time goes on. How great will the game suffer because of the breakdown in the minor leagues of all the cuts? How will it suffer because of all the cuts, with the big leagues we were talking about last week with the scouting?
Right. I'm not having those scouts out there.
I think that, right now we're so focused in on just this one thing. Everybody's got the feeling, and I believe it's true, that if baseball came back as quickly as possible, that it would do itself a service because a lot of people would be excited to be able to see live Major League Baseball games, Major League sports in general.
Right.
But we're not watching. It's like any time. It's like watching when a big thing happens in the world, like the government comes up and all of a sudden it's, hey, what's going on? It's like this. COVID-19's happening. And while we're all focused on COVID-19, what's happening over here? So, it's like the sleight of hand trick. What's my left hand? While you're watching my left hand, what's my right hand doing? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, all these changes get made by the government. Well, nobody's looking because we were all focused on something else. We're all focused on bringing the game back right now and saying that, and everybody going back to 1994. And at first I was in the same thought process, but I realized it's not even about that. 94 was 94. It was a whole different set of things.
And 26 years ago.
Yeah, and now we're in a whole different set of problems. The game would have been going on right now without issue if not for the coronavirus. And instead of looking at it as like, well, we got to get it back to where it was, maybe this time off was so that we could figure out how to do it better, how to fix the things that are wrong. All of the things that are going on right now seem to me like something that we're getting a reset. Maybe not a do-over, but a reset. And it's time to look at things. All the protests going on right now. They're not going away, and it wasn't just in one place. The protests are everywhere, all over the world. People are protesting or marching in solidarity in other countries. And instead of looking at that and going, wait, some force of nature or some force in the world got tired of watching us fumble through everything and is saying, you need to fix this now. And every time that we think we're about to get over it and can start doing things again, this year anyway, something comes in, sweeps the leg out, and we got to get up and start over again. We're the itsy bitsy spider. We got to climb back up the water spout every single time. And this is what's happening with baseball. They're not looking at the big picture. They're looking at, this is what's going to happen. We're not going to have any money. You guys got money. Don't tell me that. And they're tearing apart the game, which is something they've been wanting to do for a long time. They want universal DH. They don't like that there's two different things. And I understand people who say it, but to me, it makes the game better because you watch American League games, you watch National League games. They're different in how they go about it. it makes the game more interesting to me.
Yeah, and the strategies are different in the leagues when you have a DH and when you don't. It's totally different. I was going to say, talking about Major League Baseball and the franchises, their value has increased by like 300% to $1.85 billion. And the annual contract of the average baseball player has increased by about 40%, but salaries have still stagnated over the past 5 years. And you see it's different. Baseball is different from the winter sports because winter sports have a salary cap. Baseball doesn't.
Right.
So for the owners to cry that they have no money, what's the Monopoly guy with his pockets hanging out because he has no money standing there? That's the owners. But I think the players too have come out and they stumbled. I just saw where the Nationals were not going to pay their players, the minor league players, beyond June, and the national players, that are in the majors. Sean Doolittle was the catalyst to this. They came out and said, if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it. And that's the kind of stuff that players need to continue to do. But again, we need to go back to the drawing board, the owners, the players, commissioner, everything, and just restart, because there's too big. Again, I go back to the commissioner. He's so disconnected from the sport that I don't understand why he's even there.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either. He doesn't seem as though he has the best interests of the game at heart, and not even the game. The game of baseball exists outside of the MLB.
Yes.
But he doesn't seem to have within there about the pros, about the Major League Baseball. He doesn't seem to care about that and how to make it work. It feels like one of those things where the owners would just as soon set fire to the stadiums and claim an insurance loss than to really do the things, make the changes, do the things that will make this game better, will make the experiences better. I don't watch baseball for all of the extra stuff. When I go to a game, I'm focused on the game. I don't care about kiss cam. I don't care about the little things they do in between. It used to be kind of fun because they would show between innings, they'd show like the bloopers, the ball going off of Canseco's head, or, little funny things like that. They don't do that anymore, but they're set so that they can bring other people that come will be entertained by those things. So they're entertained between innings. I'm entertained during the inning because I'm watching. I'm watching how the game goes. Mm-hmm. I stop and watch. I've watched the Korean baseball because once you get past, and I'll admit, it's kind of weird to watch a game where there's nobody there. Once you start watching it, you see it's the basics of baseball. There's great plays there. All of those things, go back to the basics. Build it from there. Stop this thing about that everything is about money. The owners blame the players and they set the players up to be bad guys. But who decided to pay them? Who decided to pay Garrett Cole $325 or $324 million a year? Not a year, but $324 million over his time. Was it he get a 9-year contract? So
I think it's something like that. Yeah.
So who decided to pay that? Wasn't me. Wasn't you.
Nope.
The fans didn't have any say in it. It wasn't even Rob Manfred. It was the Steinbrenners. They said, okay, we're going to pay this. I'm not saying that, it's just like Mike Trout. Now, it's easy because I'm an Angels fan. I'm happy to see that he stayed here with the Angels, and he's $426 million total with the extension because they just added on to the end of his current deal. But he's a player people go to see. I've always looked at it that way. Who are you gonna pay the most? The people show up to see.
Yeah, and then they get to experience and see the other players that are behind Mike Trout making those plays. You never
know. The guys who might get overlooked any other time You'll get to see some other great players. Andrelton Simmons, you'll get to see him. Now Anthony Rendon's there, you'll see him. All of the people who complain about Albert Pujols, you get to see him at the end of his career going for the big milestones, because people are going to show up to see Mike Trout because they want to know what he's all about. So I get that. He helps generate a lot of money. But did he have to make that much money? No. Did any of them have to make that? I think I've told you this story, but I remember having a conversation with an old boss of mine who told me, I don't watch baseball anymore. I hate it because the players have gotten too greedy. And I said, is it really the players' fault? And I explained to him, number one, I watch baseball because I watch baseball. I'll stop and watch a Little League game. And I used an example. I said, if I walk into you tomorrow and say, look, I'd like to make $1 million a year, and you say, okay, whose fault is it that I'm making $1 million a year? Is it mine? No, it's yours.
Yeah, you just ask.
I just said, hey, I want to make $1 million a year. Will you pay me $1 million a year? You said, yeah. How is it that player's fault? And if that player doesn't like the fact that you're not going to pay him that much, then there's negotiating. That player doesn't have to play.
Yeah, look at like Craig Kimbrell. How long did he set? Or Dallas Keuchel?
Right.
They sat. Craig Kimbrell, he comes to mind because he was the one that was, I want this much. That's where your negotiations come in. And you're right. The owners are the ones they're saying, we want this player and this is what we're going to do to get him. But now we need to have a season, but we don't want to pay you that much. Well,
we want you to stop us from overspending.
Yes.
It's like if you go to the bank and you tell them, I want you to put a hold on my account if my balance gets to this point. Okay, I think that's something you can do now, or have been able to do. But you can at least put alerts on your account through the app of your bank or whatever. Put an alert so it tells you you're at this amount. If you set it, let's say at $100, once your account gets to $100, send me alert. If it goes under, whatever. So that way it's the same thing. We want you to manage this for us. You need to help us stop spending so much money. I think, like we said, the owners don't care.
Unfortunately, they don't.
They aren't going to lose any money or substantial money in the way that the players will. If there's no season, the players lose everything for the season. Most of them are fine. They make enough money that they're covered for years to come, probably. But the owners don't have that issue. The players will lose everything. Obviously, the minor leaguers are out of luck. And even at $1,600 a month, unless they're able to get like this pandemic unemployment, PUA, I think they call it, so that it can add into it. So we have all of that. I say, as much as I hate to say it, call it. Don't bother with the season this year. There's so much else going on. The protests that are going on are far more important than anything else that's happening in the world today, any professional sport. And most of the players in all of the sports will tell you that. That's more important than what's going on here.
I would think that a lot of just looking at Twitter, those feeds, I can't give you a percentage, but I'd say the majority of fans, we all want baseball to come back, but you're exactly right. We just need them to say, we're not going to do it. Or we're going to do it, and we're going to do it on this day. It's going to start this day. Be a definitive date instead of this back and forth, because it doesn't help anybody, and it just hurts the game of baseball.
Well, Adrian Gonzalez, former Dodger, he came out recently and said he doesn't see that it's going to happen, and maybe it shouldn't. He did say, hey, if I was an owner, I would just get minor leaguers to come in and play the season so that people have something to watch. But there's no strike. He's kind of playing both sides of the fence when he looks at it. But for the most part, he's looking, hey, he's a former player as well.
Yes.
And he's not turning on them and saying, just give it up and do it. He's saying, no, don't. Because you'll undo, if you give into this, you'll undo everything that was done by people in 94, by the people before that, and the people before that. And eventually you even get back to undoing something that Curt Flood did in creating free agency.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that the biggest thing is call the season and start working on the new CBA. Use all this time off to start working on the next agreement. So that way, when the next season starts, you already have an agreement in place and it's not a season played under a further dark cloud. I guess a rain cloud would be better because we're already under that rain cloud. I think we alluded to it at the beginning, the first episode of this podcast. It's a rain out. Mm-hmm. The rain clouds are still around. Just say we're calling the game. We'll come back next season and take this time to work on the new collective bargaining agreement and figure it all out. Have that time to work through it, be deliberate about it, make changes to the game where changes need to be made, do the things that need to be done so that the players are taken care of on all levels, so that the game is taken care of on all levels. During that time, rev up your PR machine and start promoting this game for the beauty, piece of poetry, piece of art that it is, instead of constantly tearing it down. When you're the leader of the game, you're the face of the organization that runs MLB. Rob Manfred, pull your head out and start promoting this game.
As much as I hate to say it, I think at this point, baseball, they just need to call it and say, we're not going to have a season this year. The plug is in the electrical outlet. The light's flickering, but you can't figure out why. Well, it's because the plug isn't fully engaged. I hate to say it because baseball has always been the sport that's come back after, think about 9/11 and George W. Bush going and throwing the first pitch after 9/11 at Yankee Stadium. And that's an iconic moment in baseball history. And they've always been that game, but it's not going to serve the fans well, the players, and the owners. If you come and you say, okay, we're going to play, but nobody's happy about it.
So as we've talked about the greatness of baseball, the rich history, we wanted to find a few things that happened in this week in baseball history.
I found this tidbit about the year 1963, which is an important year for us because that's the year our parents were married. It's our, as we say, the cradle of our civilization began in 1963. The Dodgers, Sandy Koufax, and the Yankees catcher Elston Howard each won their league's Most Valuable Player awards that year, and both players wore the number 32. Well, the NFL's Most Valuable Player award winner that year was Jim Brown, and he also wore the number 32. So that got us to thinking about what else happened in baseball history, but we narrowed it down to this week.
Oh, we could have gone on. I was looking at, I don't remember if I was looking at Baseball Reference, Statcast.com, and I could have gone back to the 1800s and found things that happened this week in baseball history.
Yes. So I found on June 1st, 2012, it was all in the family for the Dodgers. They became the first franchise in history to have a starting lineup with 5 sons of former major leaguers, including an entire infield. So you had Tony Gwynn Jr., who was leading off in center field, Ivan De Jesus Jr., who batted second at third base, Jerry Hairston Jr., second base, he batted cleanup. Scott Van Slyke, son of Andy, batted fifth, and he was at third base. Dee Gordon, son of Tom, batted eighth. Batted eighth at shortstop. Now, in that game, they went 6 for 19, and they lost to the Rockies 13-3. But still I know, it didn't end well, but it's very cool that, they had all those players and their dads were also major league players. So I thought that was really cool.
That's pretty awesome. That's a neat stat. I was looking as well this week in Angels history, specifically on June 1st of 1975. Nolan Ryan threw his fourth no-hitter versus the Baltimore Orioles.
Nolan Ryan again, but he was great.
It was. He set records and he set a standard that will never be met again. He is an anomaly. And it's not just about the way that the game's played now. He was a workhorse. He was different than most players even while he played.
Yes. I think one of my favorite memories, baseball memories, is after our dad retired from the Air Force, moved to a little town in Oklahoma. Altus Air Force Base is there. And Dad said, hey, let's go to a Rangers game. So he got tickets. We went and picked him up at Will Call. We didn't know who was pitching. We didn't know anything. We just were going to go to the game. Nolan Ryan pitched that night. And Dad and I were so excited. It was just like, we just picked a day. Okay, we're going to go. And drove the 4 hours down. And we were rewarded with seeing Nolan Ryan pitch.
You were, absolutely. That was 2 stadiums ago.
Yeah.
For the Rangers. I used to, with Nolan Ryan, I used to watch the rotation. So that way I could make sure I got tickets to the right night when the Rangers came to Anaheim. And then something happened in the rotation and he pitched either, I think a night later or a night earlier. And I missed him because of that. And so from then on out, whenever the Rangers came to town, I just bought tickets to all 3 games or 4 games, whatever the series was. So that way I wasn't going to miss out on them.
So I have another one. This is not Dodger related. The New York Giants became the first team in the 20th century to score in every inning on June 1st, 1923. The Giants went on to beat the Philadelphia Phillies in that game 22-8.
Wow.
They were clobbered.
Yeah, and they scored in every inning. That doesn't happen very often. I found something that kind of was interesting from the standpoint that 2 different things happened with one player, 2 different years, but in this same week. In 1925, Lou Gehrig plays Game 1 of his 2,130 game consecutive streak. In 1941 is when he passed away from ALS, now known as Lou Gehrig's disease.
Another similar with one player this week, in 1915, Babe Ruth hit his 2nd career home run. The same week of June 1st, 1935, he announced his retirement.
20 years later and 712 home runs later.
Later, yes. So I think one of the things, as much as, we talked about how much we want baseball to come back so we can talk about the games, talk about what's going on around the league. One of the things that, and probably maybe because of the podcast too, but is digging into baseball history. I love history. We've talked about that before. You love history, kind of grew up that way. But being able to dig deeper and find out more about the history of baseball, and then it just deepens my love of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. The history of it helps build up an appreciation of the game in general. You see these things that happened, how it shaped what the game meant during times like this, like we talked about earlier, how the game has affected the United States, how it's brought people together. World War II, how many players went off and fought, and at some point FDR said, we need baseball. It's always played a significant part in our world. That's why I think a lot of people are upset about what's going on, and I get it. I'm upset from that standpoint too, but I want to see the bigger picture. All right, so I have one more.
Okay.
Before we wrap things up today. I thought this one was kind of cool because I never really thought about this happening. In 1995, Pedro Martinez, then of the Montreal Expos, becomes the 2nd pitcher to have his perfect game broken up in extra innings. So he pitched 9 perfect, and in the 10th inning, it was broken up. He's only the 2nd one. The first one was Harvey Haddix, who pitched for the Pirates back in 1959. I didn't look into this, but maybe I should. Does that still count as a perfect game? A perfect game is 27 outs.
That's
no
true.
walks, no errors. So is that a perfect game, or because the game went into extra innings, do you lose the perfect game because you gave up that run later on? I wonder if he had left the game after that.
Yeah, that's something we have to do some research on, back to baseball history.
There you go. So we'll look into that. I recommend you go out, find any of the baseball sites, Baseball Reference, Baseball Almanac, StatCast, and look up what happened on whatever day it is in baseball history. Don't just look at it and read it, go, oh, so-and-so got a triple that caused this. No, read it and then look into it. There's a game log somewhere, and you can see a story. There's a story behind these things that you might be surprised about. And it might very well tie you closer and tighter into the game of baseball. That'll do it for this week's Sibling Rivalry Baseball Podcast.
Remember, you can find us on our website, siblingrivalrybb.com, and on Facebook and Instagram at Sibling Rivalry BB.
Don't forget us on Twitter at Sibling Rivalry BB without the A, and you can email us, show@siblingrivalrybb.com. We'd love to hear what you think. Subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to our podcast.
Join us next week as we continue to monitor the state of affairs of dun 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 Baseball Gate.
And we wonder, is a NASCAR game in Planet Head's future? And if so, will he take Josh Fields?
You're out!